Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for attending this afternoon's Statehouse report. As you can see, our advocacy team is currently at the Capitol, so they're kind of in the field right now. Super excited to talk to all of you this afternoon. For anyone who is new to GoToWebinar, you should have a control panel on the right side of your screen. That's where you're going to ask questions. We'll be asking those throughout the Statehouse report, so feel free to throw those in there and I'll ask those as we go. So with that, Megan, I will turn it over to you.
Okay, great. Hi, thanks. Sorry about that. Just couldn't hear you quite yet, McKenna. Good afternoon, everyone. Megan Dollar here with Colorado Municipal League, and with our newest webinar. We have a lot to cover today. As you may or may not be able to tell, we are all doing this from the Capitol, so lots of busy things to talk about. I'm going to go ahead and kick it to Jacqueline to get us started.
Good afternoon. So a real quick update on what I'm working on right now. House Bill 1104, which is the Powerline Trails bill. Again, we are neutral on this bill because we got our amendments passed in it, but this bill has passed the Senate. There were some minor amendments made. Nothing changes our position on that, but it did pass the Senate and it actually did repass the House. They concurred with the Senate amendments, so we will be moving to the governor's desk for signature shortly. House Bill 1142 extended alcohol service hours permit was postponed indefinitely in committee last week. We supported this bill because it gave a local option for our locals to decide if they wanted to offer this permit for their businesses to be open either until 4 a.m. in the morning or open early at 5 a.m. Again, this bill was postponed indefinitely. They were going to change it to a study to see if it had any impact on public safety or drunk driving, specifically Mothers Against Drunk Driving and some of the safety, public safety and the State Patrol and other, well, not State Patrol, but other safety organizations and policing organizations had some problems with it because of the drunk driving aspects of the bill. So going back to the drawing board on that one, but that did not pass and died in its first committee hearing. Senate Bill 120, the regulation of Kratom processors, we are neutral on this bill. And we did get our amendment that we requested was added in committee last week. And that will mean that we are still allowed to implement ordinances that are more strict than what is in the bill for the regulation. I will say that also in committee, they added an amendment saying that you have to be over 21 to purchase Kratom. In the introduced version of the bill, it had an 18 and up, but they did amend it to be 21 and up. So any of our ordinances need to be more strict than what's in the bill if we want to do anything beyond what's in Senate Bill 120. But again, our amendment did pass and it's moving forward to its next committee hearing. Further, Senate Bill 149 is improving marijuana industry regulations. We are support if amended on this bill. What this would do is add some compliance checks to our marijuana businesses with the support of the state behind that to help with our local licensing authorities with these compliance checks. Further, it creates some requirements on the tracking systems and how they would be accessible on the internet for viewing for the public and for the licensing authorities. And then also in increasing non-industry partners on workforces and task groups that are creating policies surrounding marijuana policy. We have two amendments that we requested from the sponsors on this bill. One of them is that local licensing authorities would have access to the seed to sale tracking system. And secondarily, for those workforces and task groups, that local licensing authorities would be part of the considered groups for the non-industry partners that would be added to those groups. Both of those amendments were accepted by the sponsors and are going to be added in the committee hearing. It was supposed to be on Wednesday of this week, but due to some scheduling issues for one of the sponsors, they have moved it to next week. So it will be added in committee next week. And again, we are support if amended on that bill. Finally, the last thing I wanted to touch on is that the budget is being closed this week. They were working on finalizing some of those issues this morning, and then it should be introduced in the House. I believe they said the 28th is when it's going to be introduced in the House, the Monday. So that should stall some of the committee hearings once that comes in for the rest of our bills and things, to make sure that there's enough money in the budget for moving forward on some of the other issues that we're working on. So I will pass it along to the next person.
All right, I think I'm next. So I first want to touch on governmental immunity. So House Bill 1272, this is the repeal of attorney's fees on motions to dismiss. So this bill, in limited circumstances right now, in tort litigation, public entities can collect attorney's fees if a plaintiff fails to meet the minimum qualifications for moving litigation forward. What 1272 does is it takes away this provision of law. So we would not be able to actually collect attorney's fees on these types of cases. We think that that's a problem, and it will open up kind of a floodgate for attorneys who just want to, test out litigation to see if it will get through. And we would have to spend taxpayer money on that. So we've been working this bill pretty hard this week. We did get an amendment added on by the proponents, which limited it to what they're trying to limit it to. They said was questions of constitutionality and first impression. The amendment that they offered does limit it. However, it doesn't really change our position. It's not enough, I don't believe. There's a lot of loopholes within there that you could still any lawyer worth their salt could figure out, essentially. So we didn't change our position based on that. This bill did pass the House on thirds this morning, 37 to 25. So we'll start working that in the Senate and hopefully get some more language to make the bill a little bit better or kill it in the Senate. So we'll start working on that. Let's talk about elections. House Bill 1273. This is protections for election officials. This is the bill that adds the election officials and election workers to the anti-doxing statutes. So essentially, you cannot put their information online without their permission and, with the intent of harming them. This bill was scheduled for this Thursday in committee. However, it was moved to, and it's rescheduled for next Thursday, April 7th, and it will be in House State Affairs. We are supporting that bill. So my understanding is that it was rescheduled because they want to work on some of the language to better mirror the current anti-doxing statute. So I think the Secretary of State's office is working on that. I haven't seen the amendments that they're planning on offering, but they'll keep me in the loop on that. I don't think it will substantially change the bill to the point that we would change our position on that. So, but more to come on that bill next week, I believe. The other bill I wanted to talk about is Senate Bill 152. This is residents of a voter whose home is destroyed. This is the bill that came after the fires in Louisville and Superior, the Marshall Fire. It's direct response to that. It allows people whose home have been destroyed to keep their residence in order to vote in their same district despite not living there because of a disaster. So CML is supporting this bill. We gave the proponents the language for Title 31 elections, and so that will be up in House State Affairs on Monday, and we will be there in support of that bill. Let's move over to Wildfire, Senate Bill 2, Resources for Volunteer Firefighters. This was a bill that we were supporting. It extends state cash funds to volunteer firefighting groups. The proponents added on an amendment that would have created a mandatory behavioral trust fund that would have been funded by employers. We obviously had some issues with that. We have since worked with the sponsors on an amendment, which I believe will go on in appropriations, it creates the Behavioral Health Trust Fund. However, it is fully funded by the state. So we think that that's a great compromise. That's going to be in appropriations, I believe, after the budget, along with a lot of other bills. So that will go on there. House Bill 1011, this is wildfire mitigation incentives for local governments. This is also waiting in appropriations. This is the bill that provides matching funds for local governments who have a dedicated revenue source for mitigation projects. The state will match those funds through this bill. The reason I bring it up is because I'm hearing rumblings from folks on the JBC that they're hesitant to fund another wildfire program. They for some reason want to consolidate all of those wildfire programs as much as possible. We think that this bill is inherently different than, say, furworm or any of the other fire mitigation grant programs, because it is really directed at local governments, and it incentivizes those matching funds to allow local governments who have those dedicated revenue sources to take advantage of those state funds and really double their impact. So I'm going to be touching base with the Joint Budget Committee and just letting them know that we really think that this is important and it needs to be funded. And I would appreciate anyone who is supportive of 1011 to also reach out to your individual representatives, especially if they are on the JBC, to let them know. The last bills that I want to just touch on really quick, I've mentioned before that I'm hearing about a Colorado Open Records Act bill. We do know that there's a draft of that will be coming, I believe, soon. We still have not seen language around that, which is frustrating. But the latest that I've heard from the Press Association lobbyists is that they are whittling down the bill. And at this point, what it looks like is they are going to, currently under Cora, you have an hour free for research and retrieval fees. So what they want to do is extend that to, I don't know, 2 hours, 3 hours, they didn't say, for accredited media entities. We still will have a big problem with that. I see no reason why the media shouldn't have to pay their fair share in terms of research and retrieval fees. So I've let the Press Association lobbyists know that, but that looks like the direction of the bill at this point. The other bill that I want to talk about is the recall bill. We've been expecting this since the beginning of session. There was previously a Title I portion of the recall bill and a Title 31 portion. The Title I portion was vastly more controversial. The Title 31 portion was more technical. So I think the sponsor is running into some issues around the Title I provisions of the bill, and so she has let me know that despite, she intends to run a bill, however, it may only include the Title 31 portion. So we're still waiting on that, and I will keep you guys updated on that. And that's it for me. Happy to answer any questions. And is Megan Dollar next?
Yes, it is me. All right, so I'm going to start out with a newer bill that was introduced a week or so ago. But CML hasn't taken an official position on this, but I think this is one that we will likely end up being, we will likely oppose. The 1301 has to do with residential properties, property tax assessments for what are called controlled environmental agricultural facilities. What the hydroponic growers want to do is classify themselves as ag property in order to get a lot lower property tax. While certainly for municipalities, sales tax is our main source of revenue, we do have municipalities that are dependent very much on property tax, and this bill could be significant. It incorporates any facility that's up to 50,000 square feet, which sounds like a commercial operation to me. So that bill will be in committee next week, and I expect CML to testify in opposition. Continuing with some opposed bills, House Bill 1024. Big reason why we are all here at the Capitol right now. This is the bill that extends the exemption, the state exemption on, sales and use tax for public school projects to purports to extend it to home rule municipalities. CML has opposed this from the get-go vehemently. There are a lot of constitutional concerns and frankly, a lot of concerns around local control of taxation and the fact that the legislature should not have a role in making any determinations on local taxation. That bill will be up on second reading in the next hour or so, theoretically, and CML will be working against it. House Bill 1152, this bill has introduced, prohibited an employer to take any adverse action to an employee against an employee, I should say, that utilizes medical marijuana during work hours and on premises, and or utilized retail marijuana after hours. CML is typically, this is probably the fourth version of this bill that we've seen. CML typically has opposed this along with the business community as some constitutional concerns, and of course the concerns of affecting local public employer-employee relationships. The sponsor did have an amendment to that bill. Was heard in the House Business Affairs and Labor Committee yesterday. The sponsor had an amendment to create a task force. Unfortunately, the way it was drafted, there was a predetermined outcome for the task force, and so most of the opponents were still opposed to the bill. That bill ultimately died in committee yesterday on a vote of 1 to 10, so they only got one yes vote. House Bill 1287, this is a bill that CML supports. This is the this is the protections for mobile home park residents. It does a lot of things, including lot rent stabilization, and has percentage caps in the bill. The main piece of the legislation that CML is very supportive of is the additional pieces around opportunity to purchase for residents. The bill not only strengthens that and builds off legislation that passed a couple of years ago, but also allows a public entity or local government to be a third party or an option for residents in order to help them make an offer to buy the land that their mobile home is parked on. So that bill passed the House Transportation and Local Government Committee this past Wednesday. It was a party line vote, and CML did testify in support. Those of you in FPPA, just in case you're not aware, Senate Bill 36, which is a bill to fund the $33 million gap in the FPPA's Death and Disability Fund. That bill has been funded and has gone through the Senate. It will be funded over the next 6 years at approximately $5 million a year. So that's good news there. Senate Bill 97, a bill that CML opposes. This has to do with whistleblower protection. CML worked on a bill back in 2020 that provided additional protections for whistleblowers within a public health emergency. At the time, we were able to remove our opposition due to the fact that it was a finite amount of time that the bill applied. Senate Bill 97 aims to remove the language around public health emergencies and have that bill apply continuously. CML is opposed to that piece of legislation. It was supposed to be heard in the Senate second reading today, but it was laid over for discussion on Monday. Finally, I will wrap up talking about the American Rescue Plan Act housing funding bills. I will try to be quick. There's several of them, and CML is in support of all. The first one being House Bill 1282, which implements the recommendation by the Affordable Housing Transformational Task Force in the interim that created a program within the Office of, well, in OEDIT, I should say, within the Office of Economic Development. I can't remember the full acronym right now, but OEDIT. And what it does is incentivize the creation of not only of modular homes, but creates incentives to bring companies to Colorado in order to create jobs and build that housing and build modular homes. CML is very supportive of this legislation, and so that bill actually passed the House Business Affairs and Labor Committee yesterday, which was its first hearing, and we are supportive. House Bill 1304, this will be heard next week. This is the local government and nonprofit grant program for affordable housing. As introduced, the bill allowed eligible projects to be up to 140% of area median income, no matter where it was in the state. Housing affordability advocates expressed a lot of concerns about applying that statewide, and so we have worked on an amendment. The housing advocates, and particularly with the counties, worked out an amendment that would actually divide the state up into 3 distinct areas. Excuse me. The first one being urban counties, which those projects would be up to 80% of AMI. Then you have rural, remote counties, or just generally rural counties, and those projects within those counties would be up to 140% of AMI would be eligible. And then finally, to meet the needs of the rural resort communities, which of course is many of our members, 170% of AMI. We expect that amendment to get worked out before the committee hearing on Tuesday, and CML will be there in support. Senate Bill 159, similar to the, well, not quite similar, but in the vein of the grant program, is also creating a revolving loan fund within the Colorado Housing and within the Division of Housing, excuse me, for affordable housing, and local governments are eligible for those funds. We'll be supportive of that as well. And then Senate Bill 160. This gives money. This is money directly for residents, mobile home residents, I should say, to help them potentially buy the park should they go up for sale and buy that land. This is a funding source that they can utilize. And last but certainly not least, I keep saying that, Senate Bill. I'm in the Senate. 146. CHAFA has a middle income program that helps individuals that are still rent burdened but don't necessarily meet the needs of the low income bracket. This bill adds additional several million dollars into that program, and CML is also supportive of that as well. So a lot of really exciting stuff happening on the housing front, a lot of really good pieces of legislation. With that, I am happy to take any questions. Before we kick it over to Megan, I'm going to give our executive director, Kevin Balmer, a moment to talk a little bit about.
Let Megan go first.
Okay, I'm going to kick it over to Megan.
Okay, great. Thank you, Megan. I'm going to give a brief update on some bills that I'm working on, and then I'm going to provide an update of the fentanyl bill that will be introduced in the coming week. So first, I'll start off with House Bill 1028, and this bill was a bill that was brought forward by the Transportation Legislation Review Committee, as you all may remember, that allows a person, a cyclist or a person on a scooter to treat a stop light as a stop sign and treat a stop sign as a yield sign, essentially. It's a safety stop. This bill was officially had its last vote in the House this week, and is heading to the governor's desk. In the Senate, the bill was amended to allow municipalities and the Department of Transportation to post signs on intersections that would not allow a safety stop to be utilized in those areas. So for instance, this could be an intersection that a municipality feels is dangerous and is not a good idea for someone to use a safety stop, or it also allows municipalities to use bicycle infrastructure. So if you think of a red light or a green light for a bicycle that's specific to that mode of transportation, the cyclist would have to follow that signal. And that's an amendment that we pushed for along with the Department of Transportation. The Senate also amended the bill to include an age restriction. So if you're under the age of 15, you are not allowed to utilize a safety stop if you're unaccompanied by an adult. So this is another amendment we pushed very hard for. And the House did concur with those amendments and voted on to repass the bill on Wednesday. So that bill is headed to the governor's desk. House Bill 1300 had its first hearing in committee this week. This bill would permit counties to regulate massage therapy practices in order to prevent human trafficking. Home rule cities already have the ability to do this, but we support the idea of counties partnering with us to regulate massage therapy practice to prevent human trafficking businesses. The bill also gives access to home rule municipalities and to counties to the CBI database in order to perform background checks on these practices to ensure that a person who is not supposed to be opening a massage therapy practice is not doing that. We currently don't have access to CBI. There's a federal law actually that requires states to grant access via statute to local governments to access a CBI database. So we are very supportive of this bill. It passed out of committee, I believe, unanimously on Wednesday, and it heads to the floor of the House next, and I believe it's scheduled for Monday. But as you know, some things can always change here, so that might not happen. The last bill I want to touch on before I get to the big news of the week is Senate Bill 138. This is a extensive greenhouse gas reduction measure bill that's being run by Senator Hansen. Initially, the bill prohibited the use and sale and marketing of small engine gas-powered equipment like snow blowers, lawnmowers, things like that. And it also had some other requirements in the bill regarding greenhouse gas reduction measures. The bill was heavily amended by the Senate Transportation and Energy Committee and removed a lot of those prohibitions and kind of strict requirements. So the bill really is now an incentive program for people to turn in their gas-powered lawn equipment to replace it with electric equipment. We removed our opposition from this bill and are now neutral on the bill going forward. It'll have its next hearing in the Senate Finance Committee next week. Okay, so big news this week. Leadership, Speaker Garnett, and along with some bill sponsors and the governor announced that they will be introducing a bill to address the fentanyl crisis in Colorado. This legislation is coming through heightened attention to the drug's increasingly deadly impact throughout the state. There's been some tragic incidences, most recently the horrible incident in Commerce City, and the legislature is taking action with a bill. This bill has been heavily stakeholdered and is there's still changes, and I want to emphasize that the draft bill that has been discussed is not, or that has been in the press is not necessarily what we'll see when it's introduced. There are still changes and discussions being had over the details of the bill. So here's just kind of a high-level overview of what the bill does. It creates harsher penalties for the intent to distribute fentanyl, and it creates harsher penalties for possession of fentanyl or compounded drugs that also contain fentanyl. Under the most recent draft that we have seen, the most serious of felonies is applied to people who distribute large quantities of fentanyl. And dealers found with more than, I think the last draft had 50 grams of fentanyl could face a class 1 drug felony. But again, I want to emphasize that all of the details of the drug felony levels and charges and the caps of amounts of fentanyl that a person needs to possess with the intent to distribute are in flux, and there's still discussions being had. So this is not official yet. There's also provisions if a dealer has fentanyl and follows a Good Samaritan guideline, and that means that the dealer would call 911 if someone who he provided the fentanyl drug to overdosed on that drug. That dealer would face a lesser charge. And that provision is intended to address people who are using the drug unknowing that and do not know that it contains fentanyl. And what CML is most focused on are the significant increases in the investment of harm reduction strategies to address this crisis. The most recent draft broadens who can receive Narcan, which can save people's lives who are overdosing, and it sets aside millions of dollars to pay for more access to those kind of helpful tools. The bill also makes changes to how the correctional system, including jails and the Department of Corrections, treat inmates who are battling addiction. If a person is treated for an opioid use disorder or has a history of addiction or requirement of assistance, the correctional facility should give that person doses of antagonists, which help with cravings and help treat your addiction. There are also requirements for jail and Department of Corrections medical providers who are required to prescribe people medication for additional behavioral health treatment, mental health treatment, etc. The bill also creates a new fentanyl paper strips that can be used to test substances for the presence of fentanyl. So if you have a drug and you want to make sure it does not have fentanyl, you will be able to test it. And it would also provide school districts and charter schools the ability to supply test strips if those district and school leaders choose to do so. Another major component of the bill is the development of a fentanyl education and prevention campaign. And this is something that the Speaker Garnett is it's very important to the Speaker Garnett and to the other bill sponsors. And this would use media advertising, regional training, and a website to teach people and addicts about the danger of fentanyl overall. And finally, it would allocate money to expand the state's overall harm reduction grant program, and it broadens what organizations can receive that money and how those organizations, including local governments and municipalities, can spend it. The bill is being sponsored by Speaker Garnett and Representative Mike Lynch in the House, and Senator John Cook and Senator Brittany Pedersen in the Senate. As I said, that there's still a lot of discussions going on. Law enforcement has some concerns, as well as criminal justice advocates on the other end of the spectrum. We anticipate the district attorneys to generally support the bill, and we are going to take the bill through the proper channels in our policy process to hopefully receive a support position, especially for the harm reduction strategies that are outlined in the bill. With that, I am happy to answer any questions.
And I think Kevin was going to give an update now.
Yeah, just real quick. I know Megan had to jump because the sales tax bill is close up on second reading, House Bill 1024 she talked about earlier. I just wanted to jump in. First of all, and I'm sorry Megan's not here to hear this, so Heather, Jacqueline, and McKillop, you're going to have to tell her I said this, but I want everyone to understand and acknowledge and recognize that, first of all, these four are working their tails off right now, and it's not even April yet. I've often said, and the legislature's never proved me wrong, that there's two halves to the legislative session, the first 100 days and the last 20, and I don't think we've seen anything yet in terms of what the legislature will be throwing our way in terms of work and time away from kiddos and all of that. CML has 4 best lobbyists in the Statehouse, bar none, and they're doing a great job on your behalf right now. I just wanted to jump in because I know there's been some interest on what may or may not be happening with collective bargaining legislation, and I'll just acknowledge at the forefront that CML, particularly Megan Dollar and I, have not been in the room in terms of any discussions. There's a couple reasons for that. The first and foremost is, I declared on behalf of the league that it didn't matter what the legislature tried to do. It was unconstitutional for home rule cities and a breach of local control, and so we would oppose anything that they came out with. Sort of closes the door on anyone wanting to talk to us or negotiate with us, because there's nothing to negotiate about. Whether municipalities and their voters are for collective bargaining or not, it's a local decision and should be, and that's been the league's position. That being said, the governor's position, which has been a tad bit of a moving target, but did clearly at least say that he would support a bill that applied essentially the state collective bargaining provisions for state employees, which is the WINS partnership model, a much more limited version of collective bargaining. He would support that, but only if it applied to counties and higher education. Interesting. We said that no matter what, we'd stand with the counties and continue to oppose it should that be the case. And at this point, all this is rumor and conjecture, but we understand that higher ed may have even actually extracted themselves out, and so we might see a bill, if we see a bill, that would only apply to counties. Again, the league would continue to oppose that. There are also some rumblings about other legislation that may be contemplated, and I don't have a lot of details on this because this is rumblings and rumors, and certainly no one's included us in any conversations, but legislation perhaps that might apply the provisions of the Labor Peace Act or portions thereof, which applies to the public or private sector, to public sector employers, and that of course would be a game changer. I think that would be outside the scope of what the governor has indicated he would support, but that would be a later discussion. All this is to say that with, I don't know, not a lot of time left in the session in terms of huge ideas and big new proposals, that we may still yet see some on the labor front, and we'll obviously keep everyone posted. Last note on a bill that applies only to the counties. My understanding is from folks that were involved in conversations with proponents is that they see that the application to counties and higher education, or maybe only counties, not so much as a legal issue, but more of a political reality in the face of the opposition that they've got, particularly from the governor's office. But the viewpoint is that you get counties, that's the first domino to fall, and then other public employers would be at least attempted to be included in future years. So a lot of moving parts. Just know that we're trying to track it as best we can. We'll keep everyone posted. The goal always to be keep local control local and home rule at home. So with that, I think that concludes our webinar for today, other than to see if there's any questions. McKenna?
Doesn't look like we have any more questions. And just so everyone knows, this is recorded and will be sent out with next week's Statehouse report as usual. So if you do have any follow-up questions, this recording is available, and I know that we send out everyone's emails as well. So please feel free to reach out.
And for the hundreds and hundreds of people that will view the recorded version of this, please go to CML's advocacy page on our website, and all those positions that are there, support, oppose unless amended, support if amended, whatever, any help that you can give in relaying those positions and the specific asks to your members of the Statehouse, very much appreciated. We got the best lobbyists no matter what, but even better is the kind of home cooking that occurs from grassroots advocacy. So please do. And if you have any questions about anything after the fact, reach out to any member of the team and they can give you more information.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a good afternoon.